آمين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحيتهم فيها السلام وآخر دعواهم الحمد لله.
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to everyone. Tonight, we're going to start with a new topic. It's going to be a difficult topic because we're going to discuss the ruh, the qalb, and the nafs. The word soul, the English word soul, has been used to describe all three. And that's one of the difficulties that we experience when we read the English versions of these words. But inshallah, the first one that we will start with is the ruh, inshallah. Now I am in a quandary because my I'm trying to get my Allahu Akbar. Just give me a moment. Okay, here we are. Alhamdulillah. So the ruh, the qalb, and the nafs, we all have ideas of, when we speak about these three terms, what they mean. The nafs we've spoken about, we'll touch on very briefly again about the nafs. But the main emphasis of what we should focus on should be the ruh and the qalb. Now, one of the reasons why it's so difficult to know and understand these concepts is because it is non-material concepts. It's part of the non-physical dimension, things that are not directly linked or perceived by our five senses, which is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to describe or to understand what these concepts mean. And also because the English words that are used don't accurately describe what the Arabic terms mean. And then we also have the other difficulty, and that is sometimes the same word is used in a different context to describe something else. But let's see how we move through these things. And as I said, the word soul is interchangeably used to describe the ruh as well as the qalb, and sometimes even the nafs. Now we can say, now if these terms are so difficult to understand, why do we have to delve into it? Shouldn't we just accept our understanding and proceed with what we have, and rather stay away from? Some people have approached the matter like that. They don't bother to find out more about the exact meaning, or a better meaning, or a deeper meaning of these three terms. But if we don't understand it correctly, and it's referred to so often in the Quran, then how are we going to practice our deen correctly if we don't understand it? Because if we don't understand it correctly and we act on those things, then we might be acting incorrectly. And that would clearly point to difficulties or problems or incompleteness of our belief system. So are they the same or not? Let's examine them, because there's some people who will say, using the word soul as the all-encompassing word, will use the word soul and say they refer to all three things. Let's start with the ruh, what the ruh is. Now the ruh, for our purposes, when we refer to the ruh, we're going to refer to the ruh either as the soul or the spirit. Now, our ruh is the non-physical, unseen something that actually represents us as people. It is the identity, and that identity that specific ruh has is retained throughout the various stages of the existence of that ruh. You must remember, the ruh was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll come to that a little bit later. But that identity of the ruh, when it starts off, then it is retained. We can't know too much about what the ruh is, because even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked by the Jewish people at the time to describe what the ruh is, and the verse that was revealed was chapter 17, verse 85. They ask you, Muhammad, about the ruh. Tell them, this is confined to the knowledge of God. Whatever knowledge you have been given is but a very little portion. Which means that if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not given enough knowledge or a lot of knowledge about it, then there's not much we can know. But there are things that we have to know about the ruh, not what the ruh is, because that is something that is not knowable. It's not knowable to actually define and describe it, other than to say it is part of the ghaib and it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The state of purity of the ruh, of our souls, is something that we are commanded to make sure that we don't stain and dirty the state of our ruh. Ultimately, it has been created pure, and depending on how we live our lives on the dunya, it then determines whether we return this ruh or the soul in a good state, pure state, or whether it's going to be in a clean, dirty, stained, filthy state. And that ultimately, of course, leads to whether we will eventually go to Jannah or Jahannam. Now, this is not an easy verse to explain. Chapter 26, verse 28, open quote, the day whereon neither wealth nor sons will avail except him who brings to Allah a clean heart, Qalb and Salie. In other words, what this ayah is telling us, nothing on this dunya, whether it is family or friends, or whether it is material things, will be of any benefit. Now, if we look at how we conduct our lives on this dunya, then those are almost our entire lives. Our material things, and our family, how much attention and time we spend on family and on wealth and material things. And this ayah makes it clear. It doesn't matter what you've achieved as far as that is concerned. That's not going to be the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be looking at. It will be the state of our hearts. Now, if we need to have clean hearts, we need to know how to purify it. Now, one of the things we must say about the soul is that it has a material as well as a spiritual component. And when we say the material component, then the material component relates to the fact that when the ruh or the soul enters the body, only then does the body become alive. Life only starts for the body when at a certain point the ruh enters. Before that, the body is not considered to be alive. And that is the material component, where the soul plays an active role. But there is also the material, the spiritual component, which we will come to later. So the other thing to note then is that, so if the soul enters the body before the body is, if the soul was there and the body only becomes alive when the soul enters, then logically one can then understand or accept that the soul must have existed prior to the body coming into existence. And we say when the soul enters, life starts, and when it departs, the body dies, but the ruh or the soul lives on. Now, these are things that most of us know already. So every ruh is linked to a specific human being. There isn't a pool, and then the Malaa'ikah takes from that pool and then delivers. Every single ruh has a human being that it is linked to. So if it comes from Allah, when we say inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, we say we come from Allah and our return is to Allah, then obviously the source from where the ruh comes can only be good. And Allah reminds us, the ruh is not something that's been created. It is something that comes directly from, as the Quran says, The ruh is from the realm of my Lord's command. That is what Rasulullah was instructed to say to people, so that they can know that the ruh is something that comes from Allah. Now the ruh, the identity of the ruh, when it is in the part of the arwah, at that dimension of existence, then it moves to the human body. That same identity is retained. And then from that, it moves, when the body dies, it moves to the barzakh, which is the time we spend in the grave until the time we will be resurrected. And that is a specific identity that is different, because the body is now dead. So it will have a different form, which is linked to the ruh. And in the year after, it will also take on a different form and a different body that's totally different from how we understand our human bodies to be. The ruh is referred to as our higher self. And we remember when we dealt with the nafs was referred to as the lower self. And it is the contest between the higher self and the lower self to determine what the actions of the body and the behavior of that particular human being is going to be. The higher self and the lower self is contesting for control over the actions and the behavior of that body. And whoever wins out determines ultimately where you land up in the akhirah. We also know, and we've been told, that if you were to take a person and you cut them in small pieces, there's no place where you can say the ruh is. There isn't a specific place within your body that you can say the ruh is here, or that is the ruh, or the ruh is not there, but it is here. The ruh is something that is in the entire body. Its effect is material or physical, because without the ruh, the body cannot live. So the ruh's presence is the reason why the body is alive. But it affects every single cell, every single aspect of the body, every limb, every organ is affected by the ruh. But the ruh is not located in a particular place. Now we can say, yeah, but we say the ruh is in the heart. The ruh is not in the heart that you have on the left-hand side of your body. That is your physical heart. The home of the ruh is in the spiritual heart. Where is the spiritual heart? Allah knows. The spiritual heart is not a location that we can identify physically. When you cut up a human being, you can say, this is the heart, so this is where the ruh is present. So in essence, what we are saying, that this higher self is blown into our bodies at a certain point that brings the body to life, and its location or its home is in the spiritual heart. And the spiritual heart is not something that is visible or material. It is made of a substance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And it's good to remind us when we talk about the ruh, where it actually comes from. It comes from Allah, and it will return to Allah. And now, the hadith on how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world and the universe and everything it contains, we might have come across and we might have spoken about it. But there's a hadith that says that Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu an asked the Prophet, let me put up the whole thing. He asked the Prophet to tell him what the first thing was that Allah created before He created anything else. And the answer was that the first thing Allah created was the Noor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We dealt with this when we dealt with the sifat of, I think it was, yeah, one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, there was nothing, absolutely nothing in creation. And when we say nothing, we mean there was no time, no space, nothing. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala existed. And the very, very, very first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created was the Noor of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did, as from that ruh, it was split into four, divided into four. And the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created was the pen, and then the tablet, the Lawh al-Mahfuz, and then the throne, the Arsh. And then from the last quarter, it was divided into four parts again. And Allah created every single thing other than those three things that were mentioned, the pen, the tablet, and the throne. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything else from that last quarter. That is what the hadith tells us. And when we say everything, we mean even Jannah and Jahannam, Malaa'ikah, the universe, the seven heavens, the people, the trees, the plants, the animals, everything. So if we look at this, subhanallah, when we talk about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we will make a grave, grave, grave error if we think he was an ordinary person. Like some people say, and we don't want to go into arguments about this, but they say, no, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a man like us. He was a person, an ordinary person. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not an ordinary person. He was not only the most beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he was also the first creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from his Noor, from his blessed Noor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything else in the entire created world. Not only the cosmos and the universe, we're talking also about the unseen worlds. So if we talk about the Noor of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we are talking about something that's truly, truly awesome and cannot be described the way we would be able to describe anything else in creation. Now, because we spoke about the pen and the tablet, I thought we should just briefly touch on how we understand the pen and the tablet. And I want to pause on this note and ask, how do we understand what is meant by the pen and the tablet? And let me open the floor and hear if there's anyone who would like to comment on that.
So, Salie,
Yes.
Yeah, the pen and the tablet, we've covered and we stated that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the command to record and write, it was because of Allah's knowledge, all-encompassing knowledge, and that past, present, and future is all in one. So it was actually recording the history of creation already. I think just for one's own benefit, inshallah, it is not that Allah requires this pen and tablet in order to keep track of what happened in creation, but rather this pen and tablet is for as evidence either for or against our own selves. Even though we know that on the day of Qiyamah, even our limbs will testify either for or against us. The Quran will either be for or against us. May Allah make all our existence for us, inshallah. But again, it's a matter of having evidence and to show, well, if per se, somebody might like, if you look to our court system and people provide evidence, and then, you know, the accused will say, no, but I didn't do that, this is false evidence. So just as a matter of that, I'm just linking it up with that type of concept, inshallah.
Okay. So how do we describe the pen? Because what you've described is actually the record, the Lawhul Mahfuz. How do we describe? Allah separated the two. There was first the pen, then the record. That's the record, the Lawhul Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. I think you've covered. How would you describe what the pen is? We have to have an idea because we're talking about the pen and we're talking about the tablet. So how would we or should we understand or describe what the pen is?
I think it's just another means of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had used, just like the Anbiya are a means of bringing his message to insan. I just think of it in that sense. But it's a bit difficult, though.
Yeah, no, these are not easy. These are obviously not easy things. Let's go to what we prepared on this. It's obviously two things. The very first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created was the pen, even before the record. Now the pen can be seen as the divine command, the instruction. But the instruction, when it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it manifests, it expresses itself in the created world, in the material world. And that command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is then sent for the pen to come into being. But it is not outside of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divine knowledge. So the pen doesn't just write, the pen writes whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands for it to write. And what it commands are in fact the laws that will govern the entire creation. And then those laws are then captured and recorded in a book. And it stays like that, it cannot be changed. So from what we previously dealt with, it should be considered as the universal law. And that is the expression of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will. Allah has willed for that to be, and the pen is the mechanism how it is actually recorded. The Lawhul Mahfuz is the preserved tablet which is the entire history of every single thing that will happen in creation, from the beginning till the end of creation. And that is an unchangeable record, as we said. Nothing can change there. But yet, we've discussed in a previous session that if you make dua, Allah, it can change the decree of Allah. If you are good towards your family and you work on family ties and you give charity, then you can actually increase your lifespan. So how do we understand that? If we link it to our previous discussion that we've had when we were discussing the question of predestination, Qada and Qadr, then, or let me just say that the two things, the two verses, chapter 36, verse 12, everything has been written down and kept in it, speaks about the Lawh al-Mahfuz. It is a register where there is the knowledge of everything that has happened and will happen. I don't want to get into the whole debate or the complexity that could arise if we ponder on this. Everything that has happened, past, and will happen, future, has been recorded and it's unchangeable. Where does the choice fit in? I'm not going to open up that whole discussion. For those people who want to, who maybe not listen into that, can go into the YouTube channel and go through some of these issues. Just in brief, it is to say, because time has not existed before, it only came into being when Allah created it. Time can never apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah's knowledge of what will happen when time comes into existence is known to Allah before time even came into existence. So Allah knows the past, present, and future. And before it has even happened, it has been recorded, and that is not changeable. But there's another tablet that's referred to by some of the scholars, the tablet of confirmation and erasure. In other words, it is something that records all the changes that will happen with respect to what has been decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it can be changed by our actions. Like you make dua or you give charity, then Allah gives you longer life or more wealth or whatever. Those things can change. Allah says so himself. If you do X, Y, and Z, I will increase your lifespan. I will give you more wealth and so on. But it's not separate from the Lawh al-Mahfuz. You must understand that. It is not something that we must understand that there are two tablets. How we should understand that is that the Lawh al-Mahfuz, or the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is what we are talking about, there's only one will, but there are two aspects. The one that Allah says is unchangeable, and there's an aspect of the will that can be changed depending on what we do. But whatever we do is known to Allah after it has happened, but it's written up before we even do or before we even born. I don't know if I'm going to get into the whole discussion of Qada and Qadr, which I don't want to do now. So we can say the tablet of erasure and confirmation. Erasure or effacement is to remove from. Confirmation, we know what it means. Now, what we should understand this to be, that these things that are changeable refers to the legislative world, but they are taken from the Lawh al-Mahfuz, because that is the record of every single thing. So even the changes that ultimately occurs are included in the Lawh al-Mahfuz. Now, not just logically, if one can apply logic to these matters, you would then say that there's wisdom in that, insofar as we are, as human beings, if we reflect on these things, then it's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written everything for us. Here's the record of how things change because of your behavior. And that is the concept of the tablet that's referred to as the legislative, that reflects the legislative world, or the tablet of erasure and confirmation. I know it's getting a bit technical, and I'm going to rather move on. And also this book relates more to the material world, the erasure and confirmation one, and not to the unseen world. It expresses Allah's power and will, and not the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm going to leave that one there and just move on to where Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani, Qaddasallahu Sirruhu Aziz, in his book, Secret of the Secrets, he speaks about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created our ruhs, our arwah. He says, and he confirms that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from his holy essence, created the ruh of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam as the first created thing, and it was termed then as the Sultan soul, the soul from which everything else, it was the king, Sultan, king, the supreme soul, insofar as its creation goes, from all other souls that would come into existence thereafter. And it was in pure Noor when it was created. And let me just say something about, when we talk about Allah's Noor and the Noor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, can we say, let me put that question up, can we say that it's the same Noor? Let me put that question up.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, Aisha.
No, we can't say. So otherwise it means Allah's Noor is becoming less. Part of Allah's Noor is in Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah cannot be broken up into parts, and part of him cannot be in something in creation.
Okay. Good answer. Muhammad Fasih, you want to add? Or anyone else wish to add? Can we say the same Noor?
But Salie, I think if we're talking about the Noor that is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so in the position of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think that we make a mistake by saying the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, we are making an assertion that Allah took from what Allah comprises of to make something and to make something else. I think when we talk about Allah's Noor, it's like the ownership. Allah owns this Noor, and Allah took this Noor to make Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, create Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's Noor, and everything else.
Okay. When we come to Tawheed,
Laysa kamithli shay. And there is nothing unlike unto him.
Yeah. Not only that. Not only that. Not only is there nothing like Allah, but if Allah's Noor was used to create the Noor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we are saying, as our sister Aisha said, we are using of the Noor, and that Allah's Noor is now deposited into creation, and creation is part of Allah's Noor. You come to a dangerous concept where some of the Greek philosophers and the earlier Muslims who went astray actually believe that everything is Allah. We're not going to go there. Nothing. Allah is not made up of parts. Allah is one. When we say we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. Nothing contributes or adds or subtracts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's total oneness and uniqueness. And Allah is not made up of parts, because if Allah was made up of parts, then every part that constitutes the whole, if one of it was missing, then the whole would be lacking. There would be a gap, there would be a deficiency. So when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created something, whatever it is, it remains creation and Allah remains Allah. There is no sharing between the creator and the created. It doesn't form part of. They are merely expressions of the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which are linked to the sifat. That's how we get to know the different names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, the sustainer, the all-powerful, the hearing, the seeing. We get to know the names and the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and through that names, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates creation. But creation never ever becomes Allah or part, either in part or in total. So we'll move on to the next point that Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani Qaddasallahu Sayyidina Aziz mentioned. I don't know which slide you are referring to, Yunus. Let me just find out. Was it the erasure one?
Yes, min fadlik.
Was it this one?
We can't see.
Oh, old age. It's not this one, nah?
Yes, shukran. Correct.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, so what Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani Qaddasallahu Sayyidina Aziz says, it was called the Sultan soul. And we've heard from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Sultan soul was the soul or the Noor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from which everything else was created. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent from that soul our souls to a lower level of existence. What is the world of souls? It is also referred to as the angelic world. And as Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani Qaddasallahu Sayyidina Aziz says, It was named the moving soul, sent to the angelic dimension of existence where angels, where the angels dwell. And from that level, our souls were created. We're going to come further on where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed the angels about creating the souls of humankind in a later session, not this session. We probably won't have time to go into that. Then from that dimension, it was sent to an even lower level, and it was called the human soul. And it was called the human soul. It was actually the time when it entered the bodies and mingled and became part of the flesh and blood of the human body. Now, if we look at if you could remember the slide we had on of the intense amount of energy that was represented at the beginning of creation, that scientists tell us it was trillions upon trillions upon trillions of degrees Celsius. Proven scientifically. They went back and reconstructed the whole model, and they came to that. And that was just one tiny bit of the part from which the universe was created, the world, our world. We're not talking about the other samawat, the seven heavens. That was so intense. Can we imagine if there wasn't a level lower and lower and lower, where the human soul, when it entered the body, it had descended to a level where its intensity was such that it didn't destroy the physical body of the human being that it entered. Subhanallah. If it was that the human body were to come into contact with the pure Noor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you'd be instantly obliterated. The body would not be able to withstand just the pure intensity of the heat and the energy that it represents alone, apart from all the other reasons. Now, the soul gives us life, but it's also connected to the entire body, not only through its 5 senses, but to every single organ in the entire body. And our responsibility, primary responsibility, the moment the soul descends into the body, then its responsibility is to follow the Sharia and to stay away from those things that are prohibited. Yeah, let me do this. Wasn't sure whether I was going to do this, but let me do this now. In the Quran, chapter 2, verse 30 onwards, is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to us in the Quran. From Allah, our Creator, speaks to us and tells us what happened at the dawn of the creation of the ruh, or the arwah of humankind. It's a bit small, eh? But can you see? Can you read it? When your Lord said to the angels, I am placing a Khalif on the earth, they said, why place on it one who will corrupt it and shed blood when we glorify your praise and call you holy? Allah said, I know what you do not know. It goes on. Allah taught Adam all the names. Then he displayed them to the angels and said, tell me the names of these if you are telling the truth. They said, glory be to you. We have no knowledge except what you have taught us. You are the knowing, the wise. So Allah taught Adam the names. Asked the Malaa'ikah. They said they don't know. Then Allah said, Adam, tell them their names. The names of those things that Allah asked the Malaa'ikah and they didn't know. Allah said, Adam, tell them their names. When Adam had told them their names, Allah said, did I not tell you that I know the unseen of the heavens and the earth? And I know all that you make known and all that you conceal? And then he said to the angels, prostrate yourself to Adam. They all prostrated except Iblis. He disdained to and grew arrogant and was one of the rejectors. Now, if we understand this, it's almost a foundation that we have to lay for how we believe and how we should proceed from this point onwards. Now I'm going to just reverse this, right? First part speaks for itself. The second part, Allah taught Adam all the names and then asked the angels to explain what those things are, what the names are. And they said they didn't know. What are these names? The names are not the names as some people refer to the names as the names of objects in creation. The names that's being referred to by the Tasawwuf scholars, these names refer to the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now if we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator, our majestic creator, himself taught humanity his names, his holy names. How do we get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We can't see Allah, can't touch Allah, we can't feel Allah. Allah's not visible, Allah's not material. Allah doesn't take up space, Allah is not affected by time. How are we ever going to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But our merciful Rabb taught us when we were in the angelic phase, before we descended down to the lower material level into our bodies, when we were still roaming amongst the angels. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us about himself. Subhanallah. The names are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names. If you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names, you become of the Arifin. Because if Allah teaches you, there's nothing that can be added to that. That's the maximum that a created being can know or absorb in terms, because it comes now directly from the source itself. So Allah taught these names to every single human being. Every single human being, not Muslims. When you were still in the state of your arwah, the ruh, your souls, every single human being, only human beings were taught the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not even the Malaa'ikah knows what human beings were taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Human beings were asked by Allah to teach those names to the Malaa'ikah. But the full knowledge of those names are known by every single person, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, whether they're a sinner or not a sinner, whether they're atheist or not an atheist, a believer or non-believer. All those names were taught to them, and they understood it because they were taught by the Creator of everything. So that is why human beings have the ability, if they truly submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and cut off from the effects from the created world and the influence of shaitan and nafs, and they purify their hearts, then the true essence of the names, which where were these names taught? To the souls. So the souls have it, that knowledge. That knowledge belongs to the souls. Where was it placed? Right deep in the inner recesses of the spiritual heart, or what Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani referred to as the heart of the heart, or the secret of the secrets. The secret of the secrets is the knowledge of these names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their pure form. In their pure form. So what does it mean? It means that potentially, every single human being has the ability to become of the Arifin, of the knowers of Allah, the true knowers of Allah, to become saints, to become walis, friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every single human being has the potential to arrive there. But it's an extremely difficult path if you have shaitan and the dunya and and your nafs and people distracting you every single minute of your life. How are you going to get to the point where you can clear out all the dirt and the essence of those names start shining through? And the Noor and the Barakah of those names and knowledge, true knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts illuminating your body and start affecting every single thought, every single movement, everything that you do. Would you be able to do anything that is displeasing to Allah? When you have this barakah and noor shining from deep within yourself to every single fabric that makes up your body. Subhanallah. Of course, we know the story about Iblis. But it's important to note here and not fall in the trap. We're going to come to Shaitan at some other stage. We'll specifically deal with him because he's somebody that we must get to know, not as a friend, but as somebody that we should know how to oppose and fight when it's necessary. But although Allah gave the instruction to the angels to prostrate to Nabi Adam, prostrate, sujood, bow down to, you normally do that to Allah. So why did Allah say to the angels, prostrate to Adam? Even though he was taught these names by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to worship him, but to show respect for this great stature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. A stature that no one else in creation was given. Allah gave that stature and that status, that station to insan, to humankind. And Allah instructed the angels to prostrate to Adam, to show respect, but also to show that the angels are there to also be of service to. And we'll come to some of that later on when we deal with a bit more about Malaa'ikah, who they are and what their roles are. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed Malaa'ikah to be the companions, the guardians of human beings. And this, we can say, links into that kind of role. But let us not make the mistake to say that because, why is it mentioned in this verse? They prostrated all except Iblis. We know Iblis is not an angel, but was he an angel, as the Christian people say? No, he was never an angel. He was always of the jinn species, the jinn kind. Like we are human kind, he is of the jinn kind, that species, separate from angels. But he had such a high station before the creation of man, and roamed amongst the angels freely, respected, until he did this and showed his disobedience by refusing to bow down and prostrate to Nabi Adam. Let me just see. Okay. I'm going to end off there and find out if there are any comments or questions. It's important that we understand this, that the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, getting to know the names of Allah is, and the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only way we can get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can never understand or know the divine being, the essence, that the being itself is unknowable to anyone and anything, no matter who or what they are. So we can know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his names and his sifat, and that knowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deposited into all of us. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. So we all have that knowledge within ourselves. And the idea is that we should purify our hearts so that when we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with those names without it being dirtied or stained or whatever. I'm opening up the floor to find out if there are any final questions or comments that anyone wish to make. Can I hear?
But Salie, so I heard a lecture recently on Nabi Adam alayhi salam and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from that realm of the angelic realm, where our souls were created and deposited into the loins of Nabi Adam alayhi salam. And from the time of Nabi Adam alayhi salam, when he came to this dunya, that is how we are now found, inverted commas, found where we find ourselves today. So from his offspring to the next generation of offspring to the next generation, and so those our souls were traveled through time, if I can put it that way, through our parents and through our parents, through our fathers, and until it was deposited, and then the ruh was then blown into into the womb of our mothers. It takes me back to the concept of a tree. A tree doesn't immediately exist. It is from the stages of the seedling and how it germinates and then grows into first the roots and then the stem and then the leaves and everything else. So I think the similitude between nature and how insan and how Allah then created us is almost similar in a way in which how it is brought into existence. That is just one of the concepts that came to me. Alhamdulillah.
What you're touching on there, Sidi Yunus, is something that I am hesitant to make comment about, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created things through the instruction. When it hits the material world, it evolves into what it is instructed to become, because now time becomes applicable to that thing. Maulana Ansari, may Allah be pleased with him, when he came here in the 60s, I think. Was it 60s or early 70s, somewhere there. He gave a lecture on how one should understand this. I'm not confident to give incisive comment on this, but as we understand more about how human beings came into existence, and I'm not talking about Darwin's theory of evolution, where they believe that man was an offspring of apes and all of that and that. But Maulana Ansari had a concept where, from a scientific point of view, one can explain how human beings evolved into what we are today. It's an extremely difficult concept, and I would rather just leave it and take things for now at face value of what the Quran and the Hadith says about the offspring of humankind was deposited in the loins of Nabi Adam. But don't delve too deeply into that, I would advise. It's a topic that you are not going to get answers to, because science has not evolved sufficiently for us to say whether this happened or that happened at that point. At the time when they thought the earth was flat, and that everything revolved around the earth, science didn't develop the know-how yet to understand that the earth actually rotates around the sun. Now we know that. We know that. So now the ayah becomes very clear, because scientifically we can prove now certain things. I'm going off on a tangent, forgive me, but that topic, I would say, for now, accept it on face value that humankind was, but for me personally, that there's unanswered issues that we need to deal with to correctly understand it and explain it, that it makes sense and it fits in with our understanding of the field. But let's just hear if there's any other comments. Yeah, clearly not have. Uh, we've just touched the surface now of the ruh. Did it come through sufficiently clear? Is there any area that we need to go over again, or is it understood by people? Aisha? Or Kamila?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I just actually wanted to ask, are we going to cover the root more, in sort of the next sessions? Because I do have a question, but I don't know if it's going to be covered, and it's not, I think, an easy answer.
Ask the question. If I think we're going to cover it in detail, then maybe I can give a preliminary answer or say, no, we will be coming to it. But ask the question now if you have the question, Kamila.
Okay, in coaching, they do something called triangle of life, which is like the mind, body, and spirit. And I came across something in this week, actually, last week, actually, regarding sort of basically the concept of the ruh, and that it has power. Well, not power, but, once you start filtering through, sort of the ego and limiting beliefs, etc., you're basically following sort of universal law. You can achieve your life's purpose, or be on the journey to it. So I'm not sure if this is something that will be covered, or if it's something that actually fits into Islam. Yeah, that's kind of my question.
Okay, so the course that you did is not necessarily an Islamic course. It's a coaching course that is for all denominations. Is that it?
Yes. They refer to this spirit as like the higher self. And yeah, so in essence, the ruh.
Now, as Muslims, we've gone a bit further. We have an idea of what the higher self is and what knowledge it contains, and how special this knowledge is, that if you were to tap into that barakah, that Noor, then you are tapping into the best possible source that you can ever tap into. Because
that was my understanding. Yes.
Yeah. So in fact, you can actually explain to them if you are able to put it in the language that. But then, of course, they will. Where do you get the information from? But yes, your higher self is the ruh, and it is the ruh because it contains that knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that no one else has. The creator of everything, you have that knowledge within yourself. If only we can get to it. If only we can get to it. Subhanallah.
Okay,
Aisha?
Understood. Shukran.
Aisha?
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, Bita Salie?
You said you were going to make a comment or a question?
No, my husband distracted me when you spoke to me. He had a question. So I was listening to his question.
Now, what say?
He says there was an experiment done, I don't know, where they measured the dying person before he died, after that. Did Bita Salie get that?
No, I didn't hear it.
There was an experiment where they measured the weight of a dying person before he died and after he died, and there was a difference of how much? 21 grams. Do you have any knowledge of this?
All I would say is, no, what I would say is our understanding as believers are that the ruh is not a physical thing. It therefore cannot be described with physical descriptions or dimensions. and therefore would not have weight. But, you know, one can try and fathom it from a material point of view. But even if you were to find the answers that it does have weight, how does it assist you? So now we know that it weighs 21 grams or whatever. How does that assist us? It's better to understand what is the function of the ruh and to know how it should be described, that it's a non-physical part of the unseen world that will travel through different levels of existence, from the angelic world to the material world to the barzakh to the hereafter, and then to Jannah or Jahannam. That is not, in my view, something that can be described as a material thing with those kinds of dimensions. But Allah knows best. I'm not going to dismiss whatever experiment they did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, alhamdulillah, I'm starting to understand things a bit better. Every time we cover something that you have mentioned in previous classes, and it makes more sense now when you mention it again. So I'm not going to comment too much because I'm still learning.
No,
still absorbing it.
Better to comment whilst we are learning. We're all learning. No one knows. Only Allah knows. We got too many veils around our hearts and our heads and whatever. But may Allah make it easy for all of us. So is there anyone else who wants to make a final comment before we make dua?
But Salie, the other concept of having where Allah says about they have eyes but they do not see, but it's not the physical eye, but the eye of the heart. I can put it that I'm just paraphrasing the translation. Would that then refer to how the ruh is perceptive to that type of sight?
My understanding about that Quranic verse is actually the other way around, Sidi Yunus. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us physical eyes. And the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surrounds us wherever we turn our faces. Why? Why can we be so sure about that? Because Allah created everything around us. So wherever you turn your eyes, you should actually see the manifestation and the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala around you with your physical, material eyes. And yet we walk past these things without recognizing even that Allah is the creator of this or that. And it's Allah's power that keeps things together and sustains life and all of that. So what that specific ayah, in my view, refers to, there could be an interpretation from the spiritual eyes, but I think it refers to the physical eyes, that we are called upon to reflect and ponder on creation and reflect and ponder on our own bodies, what goes on inside our bodies, yet we know so little about it. So yes, that would be, in my view, the obligation to reflect and ponder that is connected, that Quranic ayah is connected to that verse.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask Sidi Yunus then to make the closing dua for us, inshallah. Tafadal, Sidi Yunus.
Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا وقرة عين وخاتم النبيين سيد المرسلين حبيب الله خير الخلق الله نور من نور الله سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. يا ربنا لك الحمد. الحمد لله على نعمة الإسلام وإيمان والإحسان. يا ربنا لك الحمد. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهمه وأزدنا بالصالحين. اللهم إنا نسألك عافية ورضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من سخطك والنار. اللهم طهر قلوبنا من النفاق وأعمالنا من الرياء وألسنتنا من الكذب. اللهم إنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. أخرجنا يا الله من الظلمات إلى النور برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وصحبه وبارك وسلم. دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحيتهم فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran jazilan, Sidi Yunus, and to everyone else. We're going to continue with this for a few sessions though. And please don't be hesitant to ask your questions. It doesn't matter how it sounds, or make your comments. Shukran to everyone. Look forward to meeting you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Jazakallah khairan habibi.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. I'm going to phone you now, Fashir. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.